Hey there, good day to you and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me on Marsha Talks Marriage. I'm your host, Marsha Clark. So, question for you. Have you ever felt emotionally alone in your marriage, even though you're not alone physically? Like you live together, you talk about your responsibilities, you manage the task of your household very well, but something feels distant, something feels off, not necessarily broken, just disconnected. And sometimes you can't even explain why or what that is. You may not be able to articulate what exactly has shifted, but you may use words like something feels off, things are not the way they used to be, something has changed. The truth is that many couples experience it at some point in their marriage or another. And oftentimes, that missing piece is not love, it is emotional intimacy. Because emotional intimacy is the heartbeat of a thriving marriage. And when the heartbeat weakens, the entire relationship begins to feel that strain. So, what exactly is this emotional intimacy? Emotional intimacy is the ability to be fully known by your spouse without fear of rejection when they know you at your core. It is that environment where honesty can breathe. It is where you can say what you're feeling, what you're struggling with, what you're hoping for, and know that your spouse is listening with care rather than judgment. It means feeling safe with them emotionally. It means feeling understood. It means feeling like your inner world, what's happening inside of you, truly matters to your spouse. In a marriage with strong emotional intimacy, both spouses they know they can show up authentically. They can show up as their true selves. They don't have to fear or hide their vulnerabilities or disappointment. They know that they will be met with empathy and support. And when we think about it in Genesis 2:25, we see where the word of God tells us that the man and the woman they were both naked and unashamed. That is intimacy at its highest level. They were so comfortable they didn't have to worry about what one would see, what one would think about their vulnerabilities. Didn't have any worry that it will be used in the wrong way, used against them, right? So that is our aim, to be at that level with our spouse. And as we've spoken about what emotional intimacy is, I want to look too at what it is not, because sometimes we misunderstand what emotional intimacy is. Some people assume that emotional intimacy simply means a lot of talking, but talking alone does not create intimacy. You can talk all day about schedules and children and finances and responsibilities and still feel emotionally distant because you're not speaking about things that connect you at the heart level. You're speaking about business, you're talking logistics. Emotional intimacy also is not simply about physical closeness. So when we heard about the man and the woman being naked and unashamed, that was not physical nakedness. That was intimate. That was at the heart level. Emotional closeness is not simply physical closeness. You can be sitting on the chair together, you and your spouse, and both of you are in two different places mentally and emotionally. You can share a bed and still feel miles apart emotionally. And emotional intimacy is not about having the perfect communication at all times. It is about creating a relationship where both you and your spouse can feel safe enough to be real. You feel safe enough to be real. So let's look at why emotional intimacy, why I say that emotional intimacy is the heartbeat of your marriage for it to thrive. When you think of the role of the heartbeat in the body, think about the physical body and how the heart functions. The heart pumps the blood throughout the body, the organ system, so that the blood can oxygenate the organs to keep them going. Without it, though, nothing functions the way it should. And you may find that if the heart stops functioning properly, you may need medication. And God forbid, when the heart stops, you are no more. The person has died. So if you don't have emotional intimacy, pretty soon that may be where the marriage is heading. Emotional intimacy If it is not strong in the relationship, it causes a lot of problems. But when emotional intimacy is strong, you recognize that communication becomes easier, trust grows deeper, conflict becomes easier to navigate, even physical intimacy begins to improve. That is because emotional connection fuels every other part of the relationship. That emotional connection, it stimulates every other part. So how the trust would grow deeper in when there's strong emotional intimacy, because remember that trust is something that develops based on a pattern. So you see your spouse and you've shared a part of you with them, and they handled it with care. When you share that thing, that weakness, it was handled with care, and it wasn't thrown back at you at the next argument to say, oh yeah, you did this, you said that, you're weak in this area. And I remember, particularly for our men, one of the things that they would say is that they don't want to share their weakness with their wives because it will be seen as a form of weakness on their part, and then they will fall in their spouse, in their wives' eyes. Fall in the sense that you begin to see them, the wives begin to see them as weak, or as defective, or not in the same way. The respect level may fall. And so I want to encourage us as wives that when your spouse shares a vulnerable part of themselves with you, not to use it as ammunition, not to cause them to look any way different in your eyes, because all of us have faults and flaws. The only thing is that they may not share it with you because they don't feel safe enough. So we must create that place of safety where they can share themselves. We're called to help. And so let us help by being mature enough to handle the information that they share with us with care, so that they can feel comfortable. So that trust would grow, because you know that my husband, him have my back, or your wife, she have your back. And so you begin to share more of yourself, knowing that it will be taken care of, it will be handled with care. And conflicts become safer to navigate, because you know that conflicts will arise, because we are human beings with different thoughts and a way of doing things. The difference would be, no, we're not looking to win, we're looking to see how we can solve this problem that we are now facing, so that that conflict is more productive. It also means that physical intimacy will improve. That means that, as an outward show of the connection that we have, of the love bubbling up on the inside, it will show outwardly in us hugging up and kissing up, and the sex would be more intense, it will be more frequent. You will just love upon each other more, because you are feeling so connected to your spouse, right? And so, because this emotional intimacy fuels every other part of the relationship, then if it is that it is weak, if it is that emotional intimacy is not as strong, then couples will begin to feel the distance. That conversation becomes more transactional. It is about who is going to do what, when are we going to do it. It's almost like a business deal. That's when you stop sharing your inner thoughts, and you slowly begin realizing that the relationship begins to drift, and drifting happens in increments. It doesn't happen like this one time, because truth be told, that if it happened quickly, then you would recognize right away that something is wrong and try to remediate. But because it is happening so slowly, that is a danger zone for all of us, right? So you begin to drift. Not only that, but because you've not necessarily because you stop loving each other, but because the emotional connection has stopped. You stop nurturing it. And things, if you don't nurture something that is living, what's going to happen to it? It is going to wither and die. So if you want for the marriage to thrive, you want to ensure that you're nurturing the emotional connection. And truth be told, that when the relationship was new, it was almost effortless for you to nurture the connection. And as you get older in the relationship, you find that you have to be more intentional in your efforts to nurture it. So why do we lose emotional intimacy? Most times we don't lose emotional intimacy suddenly. It happens in increments. It happens gradually. When it happens when life gets busy, it happens when work becomes more demanding, when children require our attention, when our schedules begin to fill up, and it's like we need 24 more hours in the same day with the amount of things that we have to do. And the relationship slowly moves from connection to coordination. So we're just trying to manage as best as is possible to ensure that we don't drop the ball. But truth be told, that some balls are going to fall because we only have 24 hours in a day. We have to ensure that we prioritize the priority. And I want to encourage all of us to ensure that the marriage is on the priority list. When you begin managing life together instead of experiencing it together, that is another reason why we lose emotional intimacy, right? It also can happen as a result of hurt that has been unresolved. So when you have a hurt within you that has been unresolved, covering it up doesn't mean it has gone away. It can stay there and fester. You begin to form a wall. So we build up these walls as a means of protecting self, because that is how us as humans we function. When we begin to feel hurt or when we don't feel safe anymore, we withdraw, or we pull up a wall to say, I'm going to protect me, I'm going to protect self. But and the walls protect us emotion. Well, we bring up the walls and they block the connection, because emotional connection doesn't grow behind walls. Wall is a deterrent to that connection that you want to build for your marriage to thrive. And so over time, you may find that you begin sharing less and less of yourself, of what is important to you. Maybe you push it aside and say, oh, it's not important to him, so I'm not going to share. Oh, she doesn't like when I talk about this, so I'll just keep it to myself. And after a while, because you're not sharing anymore, you may not even recognize that you don't have anything to talk about anymore. And it's not necessarily because you don't care. It is because you don't feel safe enough to be vulnerable, to show your true self anymore. So sometimes too, many couples, they reach a stage where they feel more like a roommate than partners. If this goes on long enough, you begin to feel more like roommates. You're coexisting, you cooperate, you do things that need to get done because it needs to get done, but you don't connect deeply. And that, truth be told, that can be so confusing to the outside world, because they see you and everything is going on fine. You have a good, strong marriage. But have you ever been at the place where you hear of a couple who has separated or has gotten a divorce, and you say, oh, really? I never saw that coming? That is because they were living separate inner lives, but outward they were doing the things that needed to get done for the sake of the family, but there was no connection. I remember watching this movie, and the wife, she was the homemaker. They had a child, so she was busy making sure that they eat and the room was clean and the laundry was done, and the kid was off to school with a healthy meal. And her husband too, he would come down and he has his eggs and his sausages, and then he looks at the paper and then he pecks a peck on the cheek and he heads out the door. Then guess what happened? Shortly after, they became empty nesters. The child moved out. He was now in retirement. They were home. They did not know how to function. You know why that was? Because they were not connected. They were going through the routine. He was being a stable provider. Yes, she was being a good homemaker. Yes, she was being a good mom. But the child grew up and he left home. No, they were alone and they could not function. There was nothing to connect. There was no more. Yes, she was making him breakfast, but then she was going to have him home for the whole day. She didn't know what to do with him anymore. She didn't know what to do with herself anymore, because now she didn't have a messy boy to clean up after. So the children, they do grow up. I'm not saying to neglect your child or your children, but I'm saying to make space to connect. Make space. I mean, this is a time when they should be enjoying, that they can do whatever, wherever, whenever, in and around their homes. But there's nothing to do because they don't know what to do with themselves, right? So let us aspire not to coexist. We have to be intentional. If something begins to feel missing or weird in the marriage, talk about it, open it up and see, where did we veer off? What has shifted for us? How can we get back on track? All right, so I want to share with you a tip that something you can do beginning even this week to tighten the connection or to make a deposit in your emotional bank account. So all of us, I would say, think about it like you have an emotional bank account. which I think we do. I'm going to say we do have emotional bank accounts. So you can either make deposits or you can make withdrawals. If you withdraw more than you have deposited, you're going to be in overdraft. It works the same way like how the bank account works. So what I'm encouraging you to do is that for this week, you can start on a Sunday or whichever day of the week it is. The main aim is just to get it done, to intentionally build up or deposit in your emotional bank account each week. So each of you are going to commit to one intentional connection action during the week. This doesn't have to be anything fancy. It could be just planning some uninterrupted time, some time where you can spend and just connect. Talk about us, not the children, not any problems that we have at work or at home or anywhere else. Just us. Maybe you could write a thoughtful note. Maybe you could do a prayer together. Maybe you could give affirmation. Later on, thick. Everybody likes to be affirmed. Everybody likes to hear good things about them. Share that. Give the compliments. Create a space for laughter and shared joy. Now, we always hear that laughter is good medicine. It goes off it true. If you can think about a time, one of the back in the days time that is etched in your mind, it would have been a time where you had a really good time, where some good laughter was involved. Something about that moment, it connected with you, and it's like it has been, cemented or welded onto your brain, so it stays there with you. Create those moments again, those pockets of fun and laughter, so that you can connect connect. So one of the main things though I would say is to ensure that you know your spouse's love language and speak it fluently. You should be the one speaking their love language so well. Learn it and do things in accordance with what their love language, because sometimes one of the things we do, especially as I'm speaking from a woman's perspective, I tend to give what I would have liked to receive, and so it may not necessarily be what my husband wants. So I'm going to ask you to learn, study your spouse and meet them there, because they would appreciate what they would want, not necessarily what you would like. All right. So, and then now, as a means of accountability, what I'm asking for you to do then is at the end of the week, you're going to check in again to see how did we do? Did I deposit more than I withdrew? Because a withdrawal from the emotional bank account would be any form of careless action that you take that didn't bring about connection. So if you withdrew, you're gonna be checking to see if you deposited more than you withdrew, or if you did a more deposits, and make an effort to do more deposits. And I know that it will keep you accountable if it is that you know that at the end of the week we're gonna check in, and I don't want to come up empty, so I'm gonna ensure that I'm doing some deposits. All right. So as I close, I want to remind you that marriages thrive when two people feel fully known, valued, and emotionally supported. And emotional intimacy makes all of that possible. So if your marriage feels distant right now, don't assume that something is broken. It may simply mean that the heartbeat needs some attention again. It may need a little resuscitation, because strong marriages, they don't happen by accident. They are built. So thank you so much for watching. And if this episode was a blessing to you, I want to invite you to share with a friend, invite them to come on and join us. Also, that you should like, share, and subscribe. Right? Thank you so much and have a great day.